I don't even know how to describe the work that these two have done. I guess we could ask QP and Chuck, because it's got to be extensive for a long period of time. But what they've been doing is working on the family history, and it's incredible. This family has been in this country almost 300 years, and they're going to get into the detail of that. I've had the privilege of proofing it, and then Barb, who's disappeared somewhere, has also helped proof this, and so we've had a little bit of a taste to the hard work that they've done, and I think you'll agree. They're not going to present the 200 pages that they've already completed in the book they're going to do, but you'll see a very extensive review of our family, and I hope you're as enthused about it as I've been. And so, without further ado,
all right.
Here's Julia and Peggy.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm a retired teacher and faculty at the University of Arizona, so I kind of have a voice that hopefully you can hear in the back without any special equipment. And so, yeah, we started working on this. Actually, it goes back to Lori, my mom, Catherine, and Catherine Metz Olson was my mother, and she was very interested in genealogy, and she and Peg got together quite a bit. Mom was not in good health, but Peg was just, they spent a lot of days together, and they put together thick notebooks of what they knew. And we still have those. And so, and then Peg, of course, she's got a lot of connections I don't have, so she's got a lot of data, and she's got a lot of things from other branches of the Metz families. My claim to fame is that I was a researcher at the university, so I love puzzles, and so getting into the deeper history in our family is just so exciting to me. Our oldest ancestor's name was Lodovick Metz, and you see this spelled different ways even on this PowerPoint. Lodovick Metz came to this country in 1726. He was born in 1705. So that's where we get, you know, almost 300 years in the United States. But as I'll show you another slide here in a second, but as we're looking at him and his life, we have a source for that information coming up soon. And so he started his life in Europe. And he is said to have been born near Metz, which is in today Grand Est, Moselle, France. In that era, it was in Alsace. And this is important because we're going to find out that he, in all likelihood, by all evidence, was a Swiss Mennonite. So you probably didn't know that about this family. And so that makes it part of an enigma because we can't find him in any records in Europe. Holy cow, what's going on here? I'm going to tell you more about that later. And then there was a lot of movement around Europe at that time, and he emigrated, probably from Switzerland. We know he went to Switzerland, and he probably, you know, went the way that multiples of Mennonites went from on his trip from Switzerland. He wound up in Amsterdam. Tell you more about that. And then he ultimately came to Philadelphia, the port of Philadelphia. And from there, he went in a little bit west into Pennsylvania. So this was 1726, and most of Pennsylvania was a frontier, so bear that in mind. And then we have all the descendants of this one person. Well, here we are, and we have lots more that aren't here. So that's quite a family that has spread from this one person who came to America. First, we're going to talk about Europe. Well, I love this picture. This is Metz, France, from the mid-1800s, but nevertheless, I love the woodcut. And Metz is at the confluence of two rivers. And so that made it a very important place. Because he was said to have been born near Metz, that's another kink in the story is, what does near a place mean in the 1700s? And so I've got some maps here to share. But likely this was the major town, and this is a town has a really interesting history. So the Moselle River and the Seine River come together there, and I think this is probably that confluence. This is actually one of the pages from the book that we're doing. What has given us a lot of information is this document. We have this story we have that's written in German, but it's not very good German. So people have struggled to translate this adequately. To complicate things, we have a transcription that was typed It was sent to a college in Pennsylvania to have the original document transcribed to text, and they lost the original. So this is what we have. People have tried to translate it because it isn't standard, and I think that's because he was German-speaking Swiss, so Swiss German is definitely different than German German. By the time that this was written by his grandson, and that was in about we think maybe 1825. So that was, and this gentleman was born after his grandfather died. So his German he would have learned through a couple of generations before him. And of course, once people move, the language changes. And we've all heard of Pennsylvania Dutch and, you know, from different influences. So this is kind of an interesting document. But at any rate, what we are doing and have done between us is we have taken every claim here. Grandfather Lodovick Metz. Well, we have his name. We found him in American records in Pennsylvania. So we know that that's accurate. And so we are documenting, this is me, you know, dissertation part 2, was born in the year 1705. Well, they didn't do birth certificates there, especially for Mennonites, but that lines up with supporting historical records. So we can say, yeah, that looks right. The grandson said near Metz, Germany. Metz is in France, and it was then, okay? But Metz actually started something like 400 BCE, and it was started by this tribe called the Medermitri. And so that's how it got its name. It's a really long history. Then it was a crossroads in part of the Roman Empire, so a lot of traffic went through there. And then it became the capital of Lorraine, and it then became a free city. So you got to recognize that these countries were church controlled by that time, or that the rulers. This was well after the Protestant Reformation, but the rulers it was a religious country, and so it went back and forth, and finally it got free of the Catholic Church. And it became a free city in the Holy Roman Empire, and it became really prosperous, and it was this crossroads again. After the 30 Years' War, you know, I hated history when I was a kid. In high school, it's like, ugh, it's facts and figures. But this is real because this is about our family. Metz was given then back to France after the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648. But after that, so it belonged to France. It was in Alsace. That worked. Then in World War II, the Germans captured Metz. And then it got sent back to France after World War I. And then in World War II, the Germans got it again. But in 1944, it was liberated again. So this poor city has been back and forth. And so we're documenting every single thing that relates to this story to say what was going on.
And that story is 10 paragraphs, and it gave us all this history stuff we never knew before. Oh. So Doug, the one I got it from, not Doug,
yeah, New York. We have two cousins, Doug.
Yeah. So he shared it with me, and he's been working on it for 20 years, trying to dissect all the facts. So that's been our mission. And like I said, you know, I love research and I love a puzzle. So this is just like we're doing this. So this document says when he turned 11, he migrated to Switzerland. And this line about turning 11, they used to say when he came of age, but my friend, the Swiss German speaker, said no. This says that he was 11 years old, and so that that was the exact actual translation of the words. And so somewhere when he was about 11, he came to Switzerland, but we don't know who he went with. We don't know what happened to his parents. And the other part of this is. Oh yeah, so the original German looks like, but there isn't any German word that actually has what is up here, so he translated it 11. And everybody that has seen it since says that that's accurate. His father is said to have been Peter van Metz. Van is the Dutch version of van, and it means from. So Peter from Metz, who the heck is that, you know? And I'll share some more things with you a little bit later, but we found that one thing that we found out in the research was that between the Mennonites in Holland, who were welcomed
and the Mennonites in France and especially Switzerland and Germany, there was, sometimes they were welcome, sometimes they were killed and driven out. So Amsterdam or Holland was very important for their survival at that time. And then it says he came to America on an auxiliary cruiser, which I have an example here, and there's some other ones I think later on. But the auxiliary cruisers were government-sanctioned merchant ships. They were also pirate ships to an extent because they would, it was dangerous going across the ocean at that time. And so likely the merchant ship had cannons. It was probably armed. And so they were hauling goods from Holland to America and back. But just in case, they had to protect themselves. And because it was sanctioned by the government, I think that they were probably also the option to capture other ships. Anyway, but he probably worked his way across on that. It wasn't a cruise ship. It was a working ship. And so it took him 3 weeks, which is about right by what I've read. And he set foot in his dreamland, or the dreamland, late in, it said that he came late in October 1726. So we have that date up here. So that's something we know. And this is the kind of thing, part of what is going to be in this book. So to kind of recap, he was born near Metz. So I have on the map here is, here's Metz, here is Zurich, here's Bern, here's Mannheim. Mannheim was also very important to the Mennonites. There's a congregation there. Bern and Zurich, sometimes they welcomed them, sometimes they kicked them out. And from Metz to Zweibrücken, and I picked Zweibrücken because I found some tantalizing records there. Metz to Saarbrücken is about 35 or 40 miles. So I'd call that kind of near. These guys really got around. Here's Saarbrücken, Zweibrücken. And so somewhere in here, however you define near, is probably where he was born. And then when he was 11, somehow he found himself down here. And I haven't found him yet. Because guess what? There are no Mennonite Metzes in any of the records. So I'll tell you more about that. Huh? They did have, but you know what? There's no Metz. No Metz. And we have books of the Mennonite records from Switzerland. No Metz.
But also they were being persecuted and killed for their faith. So
Yes.
they didn't want their name out there because they didn't want to be killed or their family to go.
Yeah.
So.
But they still, but the Swiss government did do census. They wanted to know. They actually had, they called them Tauferjäger. They had people who were paid to hunt down Mennonites, and they got a reward for bringing them in to be imprisoned or fined or thrown out of the country. And so that is something that's kind of, we don't think about today. But knowing this lets us know what inspired these people to take this journey across the ocean and leave everything behind, literally, and come to what was then British colonial America. And so even though I don't find him in the Mennonite records, we can tell from who he associated with when he was here. His wives were Mennonite. His sons and daughters' spouses were Mennonite. He was in a Mennonite community. So that says, I bet he was a Mennonite. But anyway, so during the 1600s and 1700s, in Germany, in this area here, was late in the mid 1600s, early 1600s to mid 1600 was the 30 Years' War. And I don't know if you've read anything about it. It was terrible. Not only were the armies just going through, even Sweden got into it. I mean, they were all fighting each other. And this was actually not a unified country at that time. This was hundreds of little duchies, each controlled by a different person. And so the armies were going through, they'd steal the grain, they'd steal the cattle, they'd burn the farms, and there was a lot of there was a lot of people were dying of hunger after the armies had gone through and destroyed everything. And then they had taxes that these governments were levying because they needed money to fight more. Anyway, so a lot of pious Germans and Swiss Germans, this was really hard for them to deal with because Mennonites are pacifists. They don't fight. They don't take up arms. They don't believe in infant baptism. they don't believe that they had to be married in the Catholic Church. And so this set them at odds with the governments after the Reformation. And so a lot of Mennonites went from in here, well, they went from Switzerland to Alsace, so this is called the Palatinate, and I think I have another map later that spells that out, and back again, just depending on the whims of the governments. And at that time, Metz was part of what was called at that time Alsace. Okay, that's what I heard from Mom. You know, Metz is in Alsace. So anyway, at one time, actually the government in Bern said, we know how we're going to get rid of these people in the late 1600s. We're going to send them off to America, then we'll be rid of them. So that was kind of the beginning of the immigration, which is where we're going next.